Vera Wang, Martha Stewart, Ina Garten, Julia Child. What do all these amazing women have in common? They changed careers in their 40s and 50s, proving you're never too old and it's never too late to change your career. So let's talk about it. Changing careers in your 40s and 50s. So often, my clients come to me scared to make a career change because they think, well, am I just too old? Is it too late for me to change a career? And I just want to talk about some of the top reasons and some of the top things I hear that prevent women from wanting to go after the career and life they love. Now, initially, I named four very famous women who changed careers, but I also have helped many women in their 40s and 50s change careers. And I know several other women, including yours truly, who changed careers late in life. In fact, personally, I started my business when I turned 50. So that was a big career change for me. And I'm still going strong. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions, misbeliefs, and myths around changing your career. The first one is, I'm just too old. Well, let's talk about it. You are never too old to start something new, right? The only reason you think you're too old is because you have this idea that you don't know what you want to do next, or you don't believe that you have the skills or experience to do whatever it is that you want to do. It usually translates into meaning that your personal and professional identity have intertwined so tightly that you can't see yourself possibly doing anything else. And because you have traveled the road that you've been on for so long, you can't imagine doing anything else. So when I hear this idea that I'm too old, it usually means I don't believe it's possible for me to do something else. And I don't even know what that other thing actually is. So, in order to make that not an issue anymore, you want to get clear on what would be the next step that you want to do. What makes sense for you to transition into the stage and age in your career? It's completely possible. Now, there is such a thing as ageism out there. So, if you want to move into a different industry or take on a different job, it doesn't mean that you won't deal with some challenges along the way. But what we do in our coaching program and when I work with women is help them to overcome those challenges in ways that they talk about their resumes and how they talk about their ability and how they show up in the interview and have conversations with other people when they're networking to try to move into a position that's different from the one that they're in. In fact, I've coached women who retired from a complete career in one industry and decided to step into a completely different field. And it's all about understanding what you bring to the table and how to leverage it in a way that allows the other person who's looking at you as a potential employee as the candidate of choice. So if you understand how to do that, then age will not matter. Now, the other thing I hear is that I'm not going to make as much money as I've been making before. Well, that could be true, but let's talk about why. If you're switching from an industry that has a certain salary that is typical for that industry, like maybe you've been in medicine or maybe you were a lawyer. I was a lawyer at one time. And I remember when I transitioned out of being a lawyer and moving into organizational consulting. Well, let's just say that the position wasn't paying me $500 an hour that I was making as a lawyer. So when the industries aren't matched by salary, it may mean that you have to take a little bit of a pay cut, but it doesn't mean that that has to be the trajectory of the rest of your time in that career. When I personally went from being a lawyer to being an organizational consultant within an organization, I dipped down for no more than 1 year. And in the next year, I renegotiated my salary and my position to bring me on par to what I was making annually in my position as an attorney. So it is 100% possible for you to be able to stay on par with what you were making before. Now, if you know you're going to make a transition in doing something where the salaries in the industries don't quite match up, then you want to plan for it. So you may want to save up in your account, in your savings account. You may want to kick in more in terms of your 401k, right? You want to maybe lower your expenses so that you're going to be able to match what's happening happening next. But taking a little bit of a dip is very different than going from, say, making $150,000 a year to making $40,000 a year. That is unacceptable, and that's not where we're going. Unless you decide you want to do something altruistic altogether, and salary doesn't matter to you. But when you're thinking of making a transition, 9 out of 10 times, you will not feel the effect of a different salary from moving from one thing to the other. And if you do, you want to make a plan so that any dip that you're having is only temporary. Again, when I decided to transition and starting my own business, I didn't start on par with what I was making in my previous salary, but I had a goal that in 2 years of running my business, I would be making what my salary was when I left. And that's exactly what I did. And I made a plan in between to make sure that dipping down from where I was before was not going to be a painful situation for myself or my family. So you won't necessarily make less unless you're specifically going into an industry where those salaries don't match. So don't let that hold you back. Not to mention the fact that most women don't know how to negotiate their salaries. What you make in your next job has nothing to do with what you were making in your previous job. And if you understand that and understand what you're stepping into and have done your research and you know how to articulate your value during the interview process, you won't succumb to losing out on any income because you're making the transition from one thing to the next. The other thing is that people believe they're going to have to start all over. That now that I'm going into a new position, I have to start over. And I think there's some idea that if you're going from a director or vice president position in a different industry, that you have to start at an entry level position. That is never the case. Just because you're transitioning from one to the other doesn't mean that if you're leaving one career as a director, that you can't step into another career as a vice president. And that has happened. The reason it happens because you want to understand how to articulate your gifts and your values. Most of the times, the things that you know how to do, you don't even value or realize that they're such valuable assets that when you negotiate for a new position, that it actually may be worth more in a different industry than what it is currently worth right now in the work that you're doing. What's true is that we value least that is easy. So a lot of the times, the things that come very easy and natural to us, we don't realize that we can monetize those skills in a new role or a new position when we're negotiating for something else. So you will never start from scratch. You never go from where you are to bottom. You will just transition from one industry to the next in a different role, in a different position, doing something that probably is more aligned with your skills, your values, your gifts, your talents, and everything else that you bring to the table in the new position. The other thing I often hear is that, am I going to have to go back to school? And initially, that's something that people do anyway when they're thinking about transition. The first thing they do is pull out that course catalog, thinking that they have to go after a master's or get another certification or get another degree in something to make the transition. Now, let's be realistic. If you want to go to medical school, you're going to have to go back to school if that's what you decide to do, that you want to be a doctor. But if you're looking at moving into a different industry, I cannot tell you how many times people sign up for certificates and boot camps and other degrees. And then when they go to apply for the other position, they still don't get the position. What other organizations, if you're making the transition, are looking for is not a degree, they're looking for experience. And you have that. You have a plethora of experience. If you've had a career in a different industry, you just have to know how to translate that experience into the language that the employer that you want to work for understands so they can make the translation and connection over to the other place. Too often we just throw everything up in front of that employer and asking them to make sense of our background. And hopefully it makes enough sense that they hire us. But we can't do that. Most people fundamentally aren't going to take the time to try to figure out your stuff to make it make sense for them. So you have to connect the dots. You don't have to go back to school. Maybe you'll need to get some other experience, but you can get that by shadowing, by volunteering, by sitting in and just, following someone else to see what they're doing, by taking on extra projects where you are or taking on a project someplace else. You can get real world experience into what you want to do next much easier and for free than actually having to go back to school. Again, as a caveat, some positions do require some levels of certification or qualifications to be able to do it. Besides that, however, there usually is no need for you to get a different degree or certification or go through any other process that ultimately isn't going to yield you the position that you want. They're looking for experience. They're looking for what you bring to the table. Understand what it is and know how to translate that into the language that they would understand. The other thing that I hear people say is, I'm in this position and I'm so respected and well regarded, and people look up to me because I'm in such and such role. Now, I remember that being an attorney, and people thought it was crazy when I decided not to be an attorney anymore. But people will respect what you respect, and people will value what you value. So if you value the transition that you're making, then they're going to value whatever it is that you're going to do next, because it's not the position that's valued and held in high regard, it's you. And so if you also feel that same value and respect for yourself, everyone else is going to feel that, whether you're going from a vice president of a company to becoming a chef, or whether you're going from being a sales rep to a director of policy, right? It doesn't matter what the transition is, because you're the one who's valued, you're the one who's respected, and you want to hold that for yourself as well. So if any of these ideas have been floating in your mind that have kept you from going after the career and life you want, just think about everything that I shared that you will have to consider, but not allow these things to be the reasons that take you out of the water to not even start proceeding after what you want to, going after what it is that you want to go after. And if you need help with any of that, I invite you to hop on a discovery call with me, and let's have a conversation about how I can support you in making the transition while you're in your 40s and 50s into a career and life you love. Thanks for joining me, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be up to date on any new videos and trainings that will provide for you to help you stepping in to the career and life you love. Thanks.